Hello everyone and welcome to another wonderful game from the ongoing Vergani Cup. It's the legend Nigel Short versus 18-year-old Bulgarian woman grandmaster and international master Nurgul Salimova. A lot of you guys have requested this game and for good reasons. It's a very enjoyable one. So let's dive straight into it and see what happened here. Nigel with the white pieces opens with c4. He goes for the English opening as well. What else would he go for? We have knight to f6, knight to f3, and now g6. We have knight to c3 and bishop to g7. We have e4. Now, it's kind of a known variation where black plays e5, and now white can capture this e5 pawn. So here, knight captures on e5, and usually you can just capture here and open up an attack from your bishop to the knight. But here, Salimova castles, and now again, common moves here are d3. You could go back with the knight to f3, but here we have bishop to e2. Nigel prepares the castle, and now again, not knight captures on e4, but first rook to e8. We're gonna develop our pieces. The white king is still in the center, so Nigel will have to waste the move on castling, and then we're gonna grab our pawn back. So here, d4, defending the knight, and d6, much like you would in a Petrov defense, knight to f3, and now knight captures on e4, finally winning the pawn back. And up until this point, it was known territory. There is even a game from 2018 World Rapid Championship between Ivan Šarić and Markus Raga, where knight captures on e4 was played. But here, Nigel castles, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens. Knight to c6, not going for knight captures on c3, and now Nigel could capture on e4, and this is even fine for white, but for example, knight captures, rook captures, we're going to attack the queen, and now even bishop to f6, and it will be hard for white to claim any advantage here. Your d4 pawn is hanging, so you either have to capture on f6 or go back with bishop to e3, so it's not a lot. So here h3 by Nigel, now knight captures on c3, b captures, and bishop to f5, nicely developing the bishops. We have bishop to e3, and now queen to d7, developing the queen, connecting the rooks, also putting a lot of pressure on that h3 pawn. So rook to e1, Nigel continues developing, and now knight to a5. At some point you want to strike in the center with c5, probably b6 or c5, or maybe a6, and then continuing with something like that. So here rook to c1, and now we have a6, and now knight to d2. So how do you want to continue playing this? You could bring your knight to f2, to f1, and then bring it to g3, but Nigel is actually preparing pawn to g4, and then the knight will be remaneuvered maybe to g3. So rook 8 to b8, and now a4, not allowing b5. We have bishop to e4, nicely grabbing hold of this long diagonal, and offering this bishop here. And while you could capture this, for example, captures, and bishop to d3, again, it's not all that much for white. So Nigel looks for advantage in other ways, and he doesn't want to trade off unnecessary material, or rather unnecessarily trade off material. So here d5, grabbing more space in the center, and now queen back to d8. And here queen will be very, very useful. You can shift the queen over to h4. Also, once the c pawn is pushed, you will be also defending that knight here. If the bishop ever leaves the control of the g5 square, even queen to g5 is possible. So a lot of ideas here. We have g4 by Nigel as planned, and now c6. Finally, we strike against white's strong center, and now knight to f1. We have c captures on d5, c captures on d5, and now rook to c8. And this rook to c8 is already the beginning of a most interesting game. Here, black could just continue rook e5. For example, you attack the pawn, then you have to defend it with c4, and then maybe queen h4 comes into the game. But instead, we have rook to c8, completely disregarding that white can play f3 and trap the bishop here, but that's kind of Salimova's plan. So here we have f3, Nigel goes after the bishop, and now bishop captures on c3, attacks the rook on e1, we have f captures on e4, now bishop captures on e1, rook captures on c8, and now queen captures on c8, and now queen captures on e1. And now after all is said and done, you can see that Salimova has a rook, but Nigel has the bishop pair for the rook, and it doesn't seem like a fair trade. Also, the knight is hanging, but as you'll see, it's not that easy to play this with white. So here, knight to c4, as the knight was hanging on a5, we were attacking the e3 bishop here. And what do you play? Also the e4 pawn is hanging. So what can white play here? It's a very difficult position where if white wants to keep his advantage, he has to go bishop back to f2. Point is, after you give up the e4 pawn, you have to play knight to g3, chase away the rook, and once the rook moves, you play bishop to d4. And now with control of this dark square diagonal, you're gonna somehow maybe get the queen into the attack. White will always have this pressure, and black will always have to be very, very careful. However, Nigel decided that as he's already up material, he might as well just trade down even further. Bishop captures, queen captures, now the e4 pawn is still hanging, and now knight to d2. This is how he defends the pawn, and now queen to d3. So if you compare this position to the one that we've discussed after bishop to f2, here it's not so pleasant for the white king. You can't really move your pieces all that much because it's very easy for black to get his, the only other piece into the game. For example, rook to c8, the rook can come to d2. If the queen moves the back rank, you can even play rook to c1. So it's not going to be easy for white. White is better here, but if you play perfect move. So here, king to h2 and b5. Of course, this is our other advantage. We have the possibility of creating a passed b pawn. So of course, we're going to do this. A captures on b5, a captures on b5, and now queen to f2, trying to grab hold maybe of this diagonal, but it's not going to be easy with such a weak king. So here, rook to c8, as we said, it's very easy to bring the rook into the game. Now the rook can come to c2, to c1, to c3, all depending on what white plays. We have king to g2 by Nigel, and now you could continue pushing your passed b pawn, but first rook to c3. Now attacking the bishop here, so Nigel defends it with the king, and now b4, continuing to advance the passed b pawn. And even though white has two pieces for a rook, his position is now terrible. You can't really move anything, and it's hard to even decide on a move here. So Nigel tries trading off the queens, which is a good idea, but Salimova decides against it, and there is a brilliant move here, queen to d4. Just getting the queen out of the way. Of course, the bishop cannot capture the queen, and now you are ready to continue pushing your passed pawn. So king f2, unpinning, preparing to capture the queen. Now queen e5, preparing queen to h2 check. And here Nigel plays king to g2, which doesn't really hold a position. Knight to f3 is a bit more resilient, but still, after queen captures on e4, it's an ugly position to play. So instead, after queen e5, we have king to g2, and now comes b3. Of course, we continue pushing our passed pawn. Queen to f2, still hoping for some bishop to d4 ideas, but now rook to d3, not allowing any counterplay. We have bishop to h6. Nigel finds a tricky way to play this. He wants to play a queen to b6, and with the bishop guarding g7 and f8, he wants to have some pressure against the weak black king, and hopefully he will be able to not lose this game. So here b2, the passed pawn continues advancing, and now comes queen to b6. Very nicely done, guarding the b1 square, also threatening queen to b8, queen to d8, both will result in checkmate. So it's very hard for black to continue playing this unless you find the only winning move. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the winning idea for Salimova while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this brilliant idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is, of course, rook captures on d2 with check. That's the good stuff. Of course, we have to move with tempo, because if we allow white even one move, then we are getting checkmated. So this comes with check, but also it means that we have to give up our rook. So bishop captures rook on d2. You can't move the king. If you move the king to still hope, have some hopes of checkmating the black king, we just bring a queen into the game. And now after the white queen moves, now we play queen f6 check, and we just checkmate the white king. So instead, after rook captures on d2 check, we have bishop captures on d2. Nigel has to waste a move grabbing the rook, and now comes queen captures on e4 with check. Now we're guarding the queening square, and we are, just really enjoying life. So king to f2, and now, of course, not b1 queen. I hope you guys weren't thinking about this, because if you play b1 queen, then queen to d8 check, and it's very, very unpleasant for black. King g7, bishop c3 check, and what do you play? If you play king h6, queen to h4 is checkmate, so you don't want to blunder away the game like this. So you have to play queen to e5, you have to give up your queen, and then, for example, bishop captures on e5, d captures, and now let's say we play d6, and now white has a very, very strong pass pawn on d6 already, and you will not be, well, you are up a pawn, but it's very unlikely that you'll be winning this game. So instead, after this king to f2 move, not b1, but rather queen to c2. This is again the only winning move, and after queen to c2, it was in this position on move 39 that Nigel Short resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So really a wonderful, wonderful move, or rather a wonderful series of moves that completely crushed Nigel. He always found that one plan that could save him, but Salimova just played everything perfectly and was able to take down a very strong grandmaster like Nigel. And here you resign because once you deliver one check, doesn't really matter which one, king g7, there are no moves for white. You can't move the bishop. If you could move the bishop, then, well, that'd be a little bit better, but unfortunately you can't. The bishop is pinned. Also, you're just bringing a queen into the game, so there's no move white can play here. If king to e3, for example, we're just going to play b1 queen. We have two queens, and we don't care anymore. So yeah, brilliant game by Nurgul Salimova, taking down such a strong player, and she's also having a great tournament. She faced 5 grandmasters so far. She defeated 2, drew 2, and only lost 1 to Hans-Moke Niemann, so having a great event so far. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and again, thank you for suggesting such a wonderful game. I would like to thank Dylan Holloway, Pat Coppinger, Mader Imam, Global Tennis Network, and Duras Press for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one, and on everything else that happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.